Hi everyone, and welcome to Survive This Crit, where Kylie and I
Combine our love.
for RPGs and horror movies to answer that all-important question: can you survive this horror movie? Today, with me is my co-host Kylie, as always, and we're going to be talking about the movie Halloween. Came out in 1978. Cool, Kylie, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We always record our deep dives last as of late, so I'm like buzzing based off of our RPG. So if any of you are gamer nerds, please subscribe because this is an RPG you are not going to want to miss. It is so fun. We had an absolute blast recording it, and our interview was super fun as well. So, how are you doing?
Things are good. Doing some, more projects around the house, hanging out with my wife, all the good stuff. I know a certain other host here went to Disneyland, which is a big deal.
Yes, I was at Disneyland yesterday. It was really fun, super crowded, so many children. And I'm not a parent, so I can't say what to do with your children, but I did get bumped into by one child continuously for an hour in line for Space Mountain, and I did not have the courage to turn around and say something. So I just endured it. But you know what? It was really fun. We made some new friends that we went with.
Yeah, I'm still shocked at the fact that you're surprised that there are so many kids at Disneyland. Well, I'm just glad that you and Josh had a fun time.
Yeah, I'm glad you're having a fun time with your wife. So, as we're diving in, Nick, do you want to give a summary?
15 years after murdering his sister on Halloween night, 1963, Michael Myers escapes from a mental hospital and returns to the small town of Haddonfield, Illinois, to kill again. Ooh.
Spooky. All right. That's a great summary. So, an introduction to this film. This was Jamie Lee Curtis's film debut. She had done some television work before that, but she is an iconic slasher and scream queen. The budget for this film was $325,000, which really wasn't a lot of money to make such a blockbuster hit. The film itself, though, it grossed 48 million, and by the early 80s it was over 70 million. So it almost doubled within like a couple years. So it was a 20-day shoot, and the film was directed and written by John Carpenter, who is known for The Thing, They Live, and Escape from New York. The film was actually released around Halloween, thank God. It was released October 25th, 1978, and this really created what would be the slasher genre. This is the film that gets credit for it because the late 70s started moving away from the gothic monsters and more into the modern world. Before that, there was a lot more focus on things like werewolves and Dracula and like more mythical type creatures, and this was bringing it to the present. This film itself was produced by Irwin Yablans, Compass International Pictures. So he was a distributor of low budget pictures, and he realized that he could make money by making movies. He could make more money that way. So he hired another executive producer, Mostafa Akkad, and it was also produced by Deborah Hill and John Carpenter. So basically, all the slashers that came in the 80s were kind of considered copycats compared to Halloween because Halloween was the first one. So, Nick, you ready for your Rotten Tomatoes score?
I guess so. Let's do this.
What do you
Okay.
guess was the Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter score?
Oh, I know. As audience, we all are just kind of stupid, so we never really know the true value that the critics know.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just gonna say, with my layman's perspective, I'm gonna say 83%
For the critics or audience?
for the audience.
You're really close. Audience was 89%.
Ooh.
You're getting better. You're getting better. All right. What about for the critics?
For the critics, I'm gonna say 72%.
Unfortunately, Nick, you're wrong. The critics gave it a 96%.
What?
Yeah, they gave it a really well, if you think about it, it was something that hadn't been done before. It was
Okay.
really just a new concept.
I was thinking of like pattern wise, audience seems to score things higher, especially when it comes to indie movies like this, you know. So I was just like, oh, they probably tore it apart or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
I get your logic there, but believe it or not, this was one that they really liked.
Okay. Just goes to show you can't ever predict what critics are gonna say.
Nick, it's time for the letterboxed. What do you think about that?
Let's see. Not to box myself in here.
But
But but I'm gonna go with 3.8. No, no, no,
You
wait.
got it right. Wait, don't take it back. You got it right.
Oh,
Exactly right.
oh, thank goodness.
Oh my
Thank
goodness.
goodness.
The heavens are opening. Am I having a stroke? You actually got it right. Like perfectly. 3.8 is what the modern audiences gave it, Nick. I am blown away right now. Stop the presses. This is amazing.
I need to go buy some lotto tickets.
Yeah. Some of the reviews for this were Karsten said, the Illinois suburbs really are a horror movie.
I mean, I don't know what the Illinois suburbs are like, so, bad for you, Karsten. I don't know. I want to say good for you, but
Patrick said, just a perfect little mic drop of a movie, which I like that. That kind of makes sense to me. So, Nick, would you like to segue us into our next segment?
yes. So, for anyone who hasn't heard before, during our deep dive, we like to do a little segment called Monster Movie Trivia, where I will be quizzing Kylie on 10 very key, important questions about Halloween. Now,
You got to sing it though, Nick. We have a new theme song for it.
I don't remember what the theme song was.
That's definitely a cop out, and it's fine because you're tone deaf. It's time for Monster Movie Trivia. Dun dun. Okay, please continue.
Dun dun. Okay, so here's the key though. Kylie can only get 3 questions wrong. If she gets 3 wrong, then she's done. She's been slashed every time and now is officially dead. Gone. So, Kylie, are you ready to answer some quiz questions?
I am. I'm nervous, but I am.
Okay. As a side note, I didn't have a lot of time to formulate the questions myself, so I will be cheating a little bit and pulling the quiz questions from another website that has a lot of information. So I thought it'd be good for this. Okay. First question. How much did it cost to make this movie?
325,000.
300,000.
Okay, well, the 25,000 could have been post production, but I'm in the ballpark. You got to let me have that. My sources said 325,000, and I dove pretty deep.
I will allow it. I'll give you that. Okay. What was the original title of Halloween?
It was something along the lines of like the babysitter killers or something. The babysitter murders or something.
You got it there at the end. You got it there at the end. The Babysitter Murders.
Yeah.
Was it the events of the original script titled The Babysitter Murders took place over several days? The script was changed to have everything happen on the same day to reduce the number of locations and costume changes and keep the film under budget. It was decided that Halloween, the scariest night of the year, was the perfect night for this film. For those who don't know, this has come from usefultrivia.com, but we'll include that link in the description. Okay, so next question. Who else besides Donald Pleasance was approached to play Dr. Loomis?
This is in my notes too, but I wrote it down and I do not remember it from memory. That's why I write things down, because I sometimes have a terrible memory.
I'll tell you what. So there are 2 names in particular. If you get one of them right, you get this.
Okay. Oh God. He was a really big star too. And he wasn't available. I don't know. I'm gonna secede here. I don't know.
All right, Kylie, you get 1 slash. Watch out! Like Michael Myers digging his kitchen knife into your chest. So the answers were Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee, you might remember, famous for different horror film roles. One of the biggest ones being Dracula. But later on in his career, went on to do big things like Willy Wonka's father in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Lord of the Rings as Saruman.
Oh, that guy. So Christopher Lee. Yep, that's the one I had written down. That's the dude I didn't remember.
Oh, and of course, it's Count Dooku in Star Wars.
Oh. Another Star Wars connection.
But it says here, John Carpenter approached Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee to play the role of Dr. Sam Loomis, but both turned him down due to the low pay. Lee later said it was the biggest mistake he'd ever made in his career. Dr. Loomis was eventually played by Donald Pleasance, who received $20,000 for 5 days of work. Who inspired the character of Michael Myers?
Oh, I know this one. John Carpenter, when he was in school, they actually went to a asylum of some sort. And one of the like doctors or nurses or whatever pointed out this child that like had just like how John Carpenter would describe as he did in his writings, like evil in his eyes. It was literally based off of a child, that aspect of Michael Myers. But they did make him an adult to make him like a more opposing character.
Yep. And that's exactly how it started out as a kid. So yes, the correct answer is a psychiatric patient. Let's see. So next question, number 5.
Number 5.
How many different people are believed to have portrayed Michael in the 1978 film?
Oh,
And we're
gosh.
talking about like, any body part basically, or any moment.
Well, so one of the documentaries I watched, Deborah Hill said, quote, basically everybody played Michael. So I'm going to just give a number because based on the intricacies that Michael had to do for certain things, I don't know, like 45 people played Michael.
It says here 7 people played Michael.
That would have been a better guess. Yeah, a lot of people did play Michael. It would make sense if it was only 7, but a lot of people were involved.
That is unfortunately one wrong for you though, Kylie. So that's another one down. 2 down, 1 to go.
I thought
Can
I was
she
doing really
survive
good for a minute there. I was getting a little cocky in my head. I was like, these questions aren't hard at all. I regret
Nope.
everything.
Question number 6.
Mm-hmm.
What mask does Michael wear?
So he wears a Captain Kirk mask that was refurbished, like literally painted white, sideburns taken off, ears like changed. They changed the whole freaking thing.
Correct. And number 7. What time signature is the Halloween theme written in?
5-4.
I was honestly surprised. I didn't think you were going to get that one. Yeah, 5-4.
I had dinner with a new friend of ours, Joshua and I did, and he's a musician, a composer. And he was asking me, like, why do you like horror movies? Because we were just talking about stuff. And I expressed to him, I told him about like the music in Halloween because it's so unique. And he actually had an appreciation for that. And I kind of told him, I was like, you know what? There's something in it for everyone. And that's why I like deep diving and understanding these movies on a deeper level.
Question number 8.
Mm-hmm.
As of now, how many Halloween films are there in the franchise?
Oh, gosh. 10?
No.
What?
13.
No.
You made it all the way to 8. But unfortunately, this is where you get the last go. So sad. So tragic. She was so close.
So close. I have officially lost monster movie trivia, but do you want to do the last 2 questions for people who are better at this than me?
Sure thing. So, let's see. Or second last question, number 9. Did Michael actually die at the end of the film? The answer is no. And then
I could have gotten that one right. Why wasn't that one before?
Then he would have died at question 9. Okay, and then last one. Where is the house used for Michael Myers' childhood home actually located?
Michael Myers' childhood home?
Yeah.
South Pasadena. I went to it.
Yeah, Kylie, you actually visited the Michael Myers home.
I did. So Nick and I got into a debate over this over text. The house was relocated from a different plot in South Pasadena to where it is now. So it was initially at a different address because I sent a picture to Nick all excited and he's like, I don't believe it was actually there. Why is there a railroad track in front? Why isn't there a yard? And I was like,
that sure there was no lawn. That's the first thing I noticed. There was no lawn. I was like, that's weird.
I told him, I was like, I'm sure the landscaping has changed in the last 40 years. But yes, the house indeed got uprooted and moved to the location that it's at now. I will link where it's at below because there are tons of tourists that come take pictures. I believe it's like some sort of therapist office now, which is just really ironic. But right behind the house is a really cool gallery that's like a horror art gallery. And they do like outdoor movie nights. So if you are ever in South Pasadena, come and hit it up. And I actually ran into a couple other horror fans who were showing other fans around while I was there taking pictures. They gave me the addresses to the stump where Laurie sits with the pumpkin, as well as another key location point in the movie that I can't remember right now. But I'll include it in the description, but it is definitely a big deal. They're all in South Pasadena. So if you are ever in the South Pasadena area, make sure to check it out. I'll link whatever the gallery name is because I can't remember it off the top of my head. But there is a really cool gallery right behind the house. And there's a little Michael Myers waiting there for you.
Sounds spooky.
Let's go into our thoughts and opinions. Nick, what did you think about this film?
Well, I think this is my new favorite of the Unholy Trinity. Honestly,
You liked it more
I
than Nightmare on Elm Street?
I do. I honestly like it more than Nightmare on Elm Street.
Wow.
I
What did you
mean,
like about it?
the story is simplistic, it's realistic. Like you could leave from wherever you're watching the movie thinking like, oh, this could actually happen to me. Oh crud. What else? I mean, that was the general basis of it. Then, of course, as I started to deep dive, I started to learn a few other interesting things. Lighting choices. The music was just honestly, I kind of like the music a little bit better. John Carpenter's theme was I mean, it's just a classic. I've been hearing it for years, ever since I was a kid. So it's been kind of a homestead. But now it means a little bit something more that I've actually watched the movie.
Yeah, that's pretty. I'm so happy you like another one. This is like
No,
out
you
of
don't
all the
even know.
films
I
we've done.
was I was almost gonna like make the effort to like order first a Nightmare on Elm Street t-shirt and then a Halloween t-shirt. And then I was gonna wear one, I was gonna wear the Halloween t-shirt and the Nightmare on Elm Street t-shirt over that. And then I was just gonna be Kylie, there's a new favorite. Just rip that shirt.
I would have been. I can picture it in your voice, and I am just so happy that you actually like one of the films that we've done. So just let's freaking go. I'm so happy right now.
Let's
Um,
do it. Kylie, so what are your thoughts and opinions on this movie?
yeah, so I like it. I wouldn't say it trumps Nightmare on Elm Street for me personally, but I do like it a lot. I think they had so many unique aspects, and I think I wish I'd watched it in a theater because it's one of those films, like our interviewee in the next episode says, like you want to interact with the characters. They're so personable and you really want to interact with them, even more so than Nightmare on Elm Street. I will say the characters in this are a lot clearer and I really like that. I guess I like gore. So I was expecting more gore. So that would have been, I guess, my only note, but it makes sense why they didn't do it. But I
Was
did.
I'll actually hit that bit on my deep dive portion, but actually I kind of appreciate that. I seem to be out of this phase of like loving like gore and more
Mhm.
about like, oh, let's leave some things to the imagination. What can we do? I think it's just a product of what time period we're in right now of horror
Mhm.
films, where everything is so focused on every little gruesome detail. To then see a movie that still had the element of horror but wasn't
Mhm.
so focused on every little gruesome detail, showing every bone out of joint and every little spurt of blood and whatever crazy situation the person could be in.
I think the 80s is when a lot of the like really gory slashers started coming. So this was like a prerequisite to that. And everyone else's interpretation was like, let's just make it gorier. But I get what you're saying there. I think the only like negative part is like it felt slow to me. And I think that's because I didn't see it with other people. If I saw it in a theater with other people and really got to watch it in like one fell swoop, I think I could have appreciated it more. My dog hated this movie. She growled, Scraps growled almost the entire time. But like the closet scene, I freaking loved that. Like the way they built that tension, like it paid off. And the last two lines, was that the boogeyman? As a matter of fact, it was. That is equivalent to me as Silence of the Lambs. I'm having an old friend for dinner. Two amazing, well written lines to end a film. So, like, I think my only caveat is like, I didn't watch it for the first time in a setting that, like, I think I should have just watched it with people. I think I could have
Mhm.
experienced it better. So, I'm going to take that note for future films and watch it with somebody because it's like weird to interact with the screen when you're by yourself.
It
So,
is kind of, and that's how I've been approaching some of these last few movies we've been watching, is just by myself. It's really hard to find like a good movie partner. But I was also say, this movie is not without its critiques. One thing I thought was completely ridiculous that I noted was there seems to be a lot of characters with the name L or with the name that starts with L, and I was like, that's you couldn't come up with other names. Like we got Lindsay, we got Laurie, we got Lester the dog. We got Dr. Loomis. We got I think I already said Lindsay, yeah. But that's like 4 or 5 characters right there, all starting with L. It's like, was that on purpose or
Yeah,
you
because
know?
all the characters are memorable, but the L's do make it confusing. Because I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, if he's going to ask me what the names of her friends are, for the life of me, I'm not going to be able to remember. I have
Mhm.
no idea. And I know because one of them is an L name. So, Nick, do you think this film would qualify as scary and as like a true horror movie?
I would say it does qualify as a true horror film. It hits all the notes of creating a sense of fear in the imagination of its watchers, and it plays on one of the big important things, which is uh, uh, elements of suspense and brilliant use of lights and shadows in order to create a sense of fear, not just for the viewers, but for the characters themselves as well.
I think you summed it up really well. I would say for me personally, it's not a film that would keep me up at night. Like it doesn't scare me personally, but
Hmm.
I will say it's a great horror film for all the reasons that you just said. You did a great job wrapping that. So, Nick, you do have a little bit of a deep dive for us. Do you want to share your deep dive?
I do. To preface it, I started off by watching the Movies That Made Us documentary on Netflix for this film. And one particular line that really caught my attention was is the narrator or one of the people being interviewed mentioned that Alfred Hitchcock's films were a big inspiration for the same elements that went into Halloween. So I personally have never watched an Alfred Hitchcock film. I would really like to, but what I'm going to be laying out for you guys right now is the elements of a Alfred Hitchcock film that can be seen inside the Halloween film. And for anyone who is a much bigger Alfred Hitchcock fan, feel free to leave a comment and correct me with my amateur view here. I just thought it'd be interesting for anyone who maybe is a Hitchcock fan to see these comparisons. So, starting off, biggest, easiest one to get at is the fact that it's a slasher film. One of Alfred Hitchcock's most memorable films to this day is the 1960s version of Psycho, which is attributed as being a big inspiration for the creators of Halloween. So it has many of the same elements, slash film, uh, basically character coming at you with a knife. There is the element or the encompassing theme of the human psyche and how that can affect a person. For the main character, it's his schizophrenia that he suffers from that causes him to be a killer in the movie Psycho. For Halloween, it's basically the 6-year-old being a devil incarnate, which I still find to be humorous.
I
But
think sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. You do know there's a legacy overlap between Psycho and Halloween, right?
what do you mean by that?
Jamie Lee Curtis's mom, Janet Leigh,
Oh,
is
yes,
the leading lady in Psycho. So there is definitely some overlap in style there just because of the actresses alone.
exactly. Yeah. So that was actually going to be another point I made. So yes, Jamie Lee Curtis is daughter to Jeanette Lee, who starred in the movie Psycho. Donald Pleasance, who plays Dr. Loomis, also plays Sam Loomis in Psycho.
Oh my gosh, I don't think I knew that one. That's cool.
And then when it came to naming characters, we have the character named Tom Doyle, the
Mm-hmm.
small child in Halloween. And in the movie Rear Window, made by Alfred Hitchcock, there is a character named Thomas Doyle as well. A little tiny one, kind of grasping at strings there, but
I think
or
that's a
straws
nod to
rather.
Alfred Hitchcock. I think that's definitely a
Yeah,
nod to him.
there are definitely bigger nods and more subtle nods going on here. So then I decided to do a little bit of research here, and all of my resources are included in the descriptions. But I looked into how Alfred Hitchcock creates suspense in his films and where do we see that in Halloween. So, first thing I have down is subjectivity. He likes to employ this thing called the Kuleshov effect. Oh, I'm pronouncing that right. Um, But basically, it's where the main character watches something terrible happen, and then we get the sense of feeling helpless. And it's normally done in this way of switching the camera shifts in its viewpoints from what's called the ogled to the ogler. In other words, to bring it back to Halloween, examples would be where the camera starts at Michael Myers' perspective. We see him looking at his next victim, and then the camera then immediately shifts to the viewpoint of the victim, now catching Michael Myers hiding behind the bushes, or different examples like that. So that's one way he creates suspense. The next is through information. Specifically, what does he reveal on the screen? So Alfred Hitchcock likes to use what's simply known as dramatic irony. He wants the audience to see something on the screen that we all know about, but the characters themselves are completely unaware of. But basically, it creates this sense of looming danger. Or it can sometimes even be something like, oh, this popped up in the first scene, and this will be what is used that the character has to employ later on in order to save themselves.
So is it like almost foreshadowing in that way of like
foreshadowing or dramatic irony? The idea is we as the audience know something that the characters do not know.
Okay. Interesting.
Let's see. One example of this was when was it Linda searches the house for her boyfriend, or when she's even sitting in her bed. Yeah, probably a better example is when she's sitting in her bed, and there's Michael Myers. We all know it's Michael Myers hiding underneath the bed sheet, pretending to be a ghost.
Yeah.
And we're all just, it's that moment where we're like, get out of there. We know who that is. You don't, but we do. That's one example of that. And then the last element, which I think is very important, which is why 1978 version of Halloween will probably be good, is simple stories. There's not a lot of deep dive into an explanation of Michael Myers' powers, abilities, why it is that he's so hard to kill. He's just a big guy that seems to be able to take a hit pretty well.
Yeah. I feel like in Blair Witch Project, we talked about how the simplicity is what makes these stories scary. I feel like a lot of really complex, like overly complex horror movies that are coming out today are not perceived as scary because it seems like people are trying too hard to make it scary. And I think the simplicity of Halloween is what makes it scary, like you said. And like Alfred Hitchcock's films. Like we don't know why all the birds are coming after. I mean, it's kind of explained in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, but we're not given a thorough enough reason for why they're attacking this particular family or whatever.
Exactly. And Blair Witch is another great example of that, where we don't really see something happen on screen, but the idea is to let the audience's imaginations run wild.
Yeah.
In the Netflix documentary for Movies That Made Us, the Halloween episode, they talk about how they would purposely set the camera and show the scene of a character being killed in a car, but on the blurry side. So that way we just have to use our imaginations to see how does Michael, kill this girl.
Yeah.
So yeah, being able to allow your audience to really think about what's happening makes them have to dwell on the subject matter even more. And that's what creates this sense of fear, which I thought was really interesting about this film.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I think this film's just really well done, and I'm excited that we're diving deeper into it.
Said this is the main reason why I just happen to like this movie so much. I think I watched it at the right time, where I've been seeing plenty of horror films where everyone's so focused on showing very explicit details of gore and violence, which are scary in themselves, but to get exposed to that so much and then be exposed to this film instead, it's, I guess the best way to put it is kind of like a palate cleanser. It's just so refreshing and nice.
That's awesome. So I'm going to dive into some topics like with the crew, the success of the film, how they pulled it off. So what would you like me to start with?
Let's hear about the crew.
And I'm going to start with the direction, directing and writing. This was directed and written by John Carpenter. It really was directed by a green filmmaking team. And their goal was to create theater of the mind. So when Irwin, the producer, came to John Carpenter and was like, hey, I want you to make this, a lot of the inspiration was horror radio shows where you're inspired by what you're hearing and you're leaving it to the imagination. Hence the reason for not a lot of gore, because they're allowing you to imagine what's happening on a deeper level than just throwing it in your face. It's giving you a chance to be smarter about what you're seeing. So the director, like I said, is John Carpenter. He did a film called Dark Star. I looked it up. It looks wild. His second film was called The Siege. It was actually considered a flop in studios, but Irwin, the producer, took a chance on him and distributed it in other places, including England, where it became a hit. It became a big deal in England. So John Carpenter agreed to do this project as long as he had complete creative control of it. When Irwin came to him, it's like, hey, I want to make a movie about like something scary happening on Halloween, like babysitters being murdered. Because no one's done a story about something like that. Something that's here and now and is going to keep audiences present. And John Carpenter said, yeah, absolutely, I'll do this. But I get complete creative control and my name is going to be above the title, which is why you see John Carpenter's Halloween.
And what was it? I believe he also argued for what, 51% of control? Is that correct, or am
Well, he
I?
had complete creative control. So all
Yeah.
the creative decisions were his. So whether that was a percentage thing or just him saying, "Hey, I have creative control," that is what happened.
And so John Carpenter was impressed about him. He seemed to be playing a lot of different roles in this film, right? So like music, main composer, director. Was there anything else he was playing?
John Carpenter also wrote this film. So
Oh, yes.
as I'm finishing up direction here, we'll jump into writing and music so we can focus on John Carpenter for a bit. But so John Carpenter, his focus for the budget was the cameras. He wanted to have really quality cameras to get this done right. So they spent nearly $70,000 of their $300,000 budget at Panvision for camera equipment that had high-end cameras, like high-end camera rigs that allowed them to make the camera move. Because some of those shots are really cool where you're seeing it similar to what Friday the 13th does a few years later. You're seeing it from the killer's perspective. And the way they had to do that is have a really unique camera rig to accomplish it. So he was also a big fan of long dolly shots, which is a nod to filmmaker Orson Welles. The last shot that they filmed was the opening sequence, which they used 3 different takes in that. You can't really tell where the takes are cut because it was done so well. But usually, like when the mask is going on the kid and off, that's where those cuts are. But he was a really big fan of those long dolly shots where the room's just closing in the closer you get. So John Carpenter, as I mentioned, was also the writer. They started with simple script of babysitter shift gone horribly wrong. That was what Irwin pitched him. So John and Deborah wrote it together. John wrote a lot of the aspects of evil and like the dominating presence, and Deborah did a lot of the character work for the friends. However, that first draft only took 2 weeks to write, which is really impressive.
So, well, is that normal? Like to write something then in, let's say, even 4 weeks?
I would say the intricacies that they applied to this script. I don't know how many rewrites they had necessarily. It wasn't a lot because they didn't have a lot of time. But writing a script as intricate as this was in 2 weeks is pretty impressive. I would say that for sure. I can confidently say that. They actually named the character, though, Michael Myers, because he was originally in the script as just the Shape. He's used interchangeably as the Shape and Michael Myers. But they named the villain Michael Myers after their distributor, Michael Myers. So it was a cool way of honoring him and giving him a little credit.
It wasn't like a middle school bully for John Carpenter or anything like that?
No, thankfully not. And like you mentioned earlier, Dr. Loomis was another character that was named after something else as well. But MGM's Westworld film, which had come out much earlier, was a big inspiration behind the idea of the unkillable shape. Because, Westworld, the show that came out, there's a recent TV show that came out a few years ago, but there was a movie first. And there's these, shapes and robots that come after you that are unkillable. And that was a lot of the inspiration behind creating this unkillable creature. And then, like we talked about in the trivia, John Carpenter actually saw a child that had these eyes of just pure evil and something that was just so horrifying at a psychiatric ward.
Which is something you truly believe is present in all children, don't you, Kylie?
Only at Disneyland.
Only at Disneyland.
As for the music, like you said, John Carpenter was involved in a lot of ways in this film. He also did the music. However, he found that the music was a key element. Without the music, it just didn't work. He tried to show it to a studio executive without the music, and they didn't find it scary. His big inspiration for the music is like a direct quote was, music tells you how you're supposed to feel about things. Hence, like this constant, just looming presence, I feel like is what that music creates. He also said the music was kind of almost meant to be like a Jack in the Box, like da, 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 and then like something pops out. So he used his music as a cue to show when something was there, similar to its copycat Friday the 13th.
And I think you're right there with the assertion of like music setting the tone for how you're supposed to feel. I remember it's another Netflix show, it's like 100 Humans or something like that, where they just like put 100 humans through like different scientific projects. And one of the things they did was they had 50 of those humans, watch a blooper reel with people getting hurt with the laugh track and everything. And people were just laughing, have a good time. They showed this different set of 50 humans, same thing, but without any of that, like laugh track blooper stuff. And they were just like, looking in disgust, like, oh, this person, So I think that's a pretty fair assertion to make.
Yeah. One of the principles of psychology actually talks about how the power of laugh tracks really is meant to deter and deter one's what would be one's natural opinion. And I think music does the same thing, but music does it in more of a subtle way. Music allows you to actually experience and feel, make that decision, where I feel like laugh tracks kind of make that decision for you. A couple more things about the music. The music is in 5/4 time, inspired by bongos that he grew up playing. He grew up playing bongos. His father taught him how to play, which is really cool. Kind of a unique instrument, honestly. Imagine him on his college campus, like, yeah, I play the bongos. The music itself took only 3 days to compose, though, which is just Looney Tunes. Like, he's directing, he's writing, he's obviously involved at least in the editing process because he's the director. And in the meantime, he's like, gotta go down the basement and make some music so I can get this film done. He just was a busy dude during this whole film.
Basically a one-man army.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I think he also was somewhat involved in the camera work because he was the director. He was, telling people how to shoot, what to shoot. So a lot of the camera work and direction was inspired by European horror films. His films were really popular with people in England. This film, he was inspired by European horror specifically. His DP was Dean Cundley, who also did The Thing, Halloween 2, and Escape from New York. They did a lot of shots that were supposed to build tension, like wide shots to really narrow. For example, the closet scene. Like, they started really wide, and by the end, you feel like you're inside the closet with her, like you're stuck with her. And subjective shots weren't really done a whole lot before, so that's one of the other things that made this movie so memorable. One thing that they did have to worry about, though, is that they're trying to create this suburbs in Illinois, but they're filming in Pasadena. So they had to shoot a lot around palm trees. And it was spring when they were shooting, so the palm trees are definitely noticeable.
You should have just cut them down,
Oh, yeah, I'm sure the city of Pasadena would let you do that.
Get rid of them.
The last night of filming, though, was the first continuous shot. like I mentioned earlier, they did over 20 takes of that scene. And they did end up doing like cutting it into 3 different shots. But initially their goal was like, we're going to do this all one continuous scene. And they accomplished that, but they just did like cut and spliced it a little bit to make it work. But I thought that was just crazy. It's a 4-minute and 26-second scene that they did. They filmed one continuous take of that over 20 times.
As far as we know, no mistakes.
No mistakes. I mean, it turned out great. So no mistakes in my book. Yeah, but do you want to hear a little bit about the actors and producing, production design? What are you feeling?
No, I want to hear none of that. No, let's hear it. Come on. In a podcast.
Wait, what do you want to hear though?
Oh, which do I want to hear? Sorry. What were the choices again?
I'll just start with actors.
Go with it. Go with actors.
Okay. So the actors, you know, Deborah Hill did a great job writing these characters to be memorable. So they wanted to be memorable characters so the audiences actually cared about them. And as you mentioned in trivia, they wanted Christopher Lee as one of the actors for Dr. Loomis, who turned down the role. And Donald Pleasance got the role of Loomis. He was not initially, there's mixed sources here. Supposedly, some sources say that he wasn't a really big fan of the script or being on set. He apparently was very known for drinking wine on set, according to some sources, but he was only on set for a week. Other sources say that he was a delight to work with, so it's a little bit of he said, she said at this point, because it happened so long ago that it's hard to determine who liked who when. But
yeah, and I don't even mind. Like I didn't even really like the character of Dr. Loomis that much anyways. I mean, the whole fact that he was just like a block away from the entire problem and never even figured it out that Michael Myers was a block away. I'm like, his only redeeming thing is he came in at the last minute with a gun and just finished him off.
Just like, yep, that's exactly what he did. As for Michael Myers himself, you know, everybody ended up playing Michael Myers. Even John Carpenter, even Deborah Hill. But the main person who played John Carpenter was Nick Castle. So he met John at USC. They were friends. But John Carpenter wrote this character in a way that he didn't need like a method actor. He didn't need a Freddy Krueger. He didn't need a Pamela Voorhees. He just needed a shape. So Nick Castle has basically said, he's like, I didn't method act. Like, I asked one time what my motivation was, and John Carpenter just says, like, tilt your head and look at your victim. But Nick Castle was quoted for just doing whatever John said as Michael Myers, and it worked. Because it's really hard to figure out the motivation in Michael Myers because you don't have some brooding method actor playing him. But initially, Nick Castle actually only came to observe set. He had asked John, he was like, hey, can I just come and check things out? What you guys doing? Because he's trying to get his own directing career off the ground. And John Carpenter was like, yeah, but like at least be useful here. So they threw him in as Michael Myers, and he ended up playing this iconic role when he wasn't even intending to.
Now get to work. Now stand there. Stand there. Now there. Was that acting? No, none of that.
So a couple of the other notable actors and characters were Nancy Keys, who played Annie. She was in a previous film of John Carpenter's, and she married Tommy Lee Wallace, who did a lot on the show, including, I believe, editing and production design. So Laurie Strode, Jamie Lee Curtis, the actress.
Who's Jamie Lee Curtis? I never heard of her.
She's only a scream queen.
Oh my goodness, that's right. You said that earlier. I was like, you mean literally because she's in the show Scream Queens?
That's just, you know, she's a horror icon. She's been in a billion different horror movies, so she has officially gained the title Scream Queen. Carpenter and Hill both wanted her, but Irwin wasn't initially on board until he realized that she was the daughter of Tony Curtis and Janice Lee. Her mom, you know, started Psycho, like we said, and her dad was Spartacus. So she is like a Hollywood legend, Hollywood legacy at that as well. Jamie Lee was actually really humble because this was her first feature. She was just doing some television at this point, and Jamie Lee Curtis actually thought she was being fired her first day on set. She had a lot of anxiety about taking the role. And after the first day of filming, John called her and told her what a great job she did, which I think is really a cool move of the director, honestly. And it's like, it's cool to see Jamie Lee Curtis starting her career in that way and being scared like the rest of us if we're given a big opportunity.
Yeah, and it seems like she's really grown since then. She seems more, clearly more confident, in her, what was it, 40 years later?
Yeah, she's done a lot. And I believe she won an Oscar this year. I'll have to fact check that before I include it in. But everything, she was in Everything Everywhere All at Once. So,
Oh, yeah, that was insane.
yeah. Another notable actress was PJ Souls, who played Linda. She was previously in Carrie. She's known as being like the comedic relief. She noted in one of her interviews that John Carpenter was really gentle with her boundaries, because she is one of the ones that has nudity in this film, and she was told she was like had no pressure toward her nudity scene. It was her choice, and she actually did somewhat of an improv for her line, like "You like what you see," which is one of the most iconic lines from the film.
Is that where that comes from?
Yeah. So she
I
dropped.
just thought that was a general phrase people just use.
Well, it's a well quoted line from this film specifically, though. If people are going to quote,
Okay,
they're not going to quote anything Michael said.
I just did it right there. There
Yeah,
it is again.
there it is. Being in dead silence, you're quoting a lot of what Michael says. Another note. So the actor that we actually see when the mask is taken off, his name is Tony Moran. He's the actor who played 23-year-old Michael when he was unmasked. He was paid for $250 for the single day of filming and was only in that single shot. He did not play Michael in anything else.
Yeah, and we determined this earlier during the trivia where you die horribly. That it is more like 7 people, different people all playing different types of roles for Michael.
Yeah, it's true. So let's dive into producing and editing and talk about the success of the film. The producing, Irwin, as I mentioned earlier, he's the mind behind the title Halloween. So babysitters were the key figures of being stalked by a killer. But Irwin Yablon's first job was loading trucks on the Warner Bros. Lot with film reels. He then became a booker, which distributed and booked films in the theaters. And in the 60s, that was a bit of a dying industry. So he also had this job of creating these sneak previews to test on audiences. And then after his wife's encouragement, he decided to start creating his own films because he was actually really good at creating these little trailers and getting audiences excited about a film, which is really important for this film because it was so well done. But initially, because of their budget, they didn't have anywhere to put it once it was done. So he was also just really talented at creating trailers, posters, marketing. Like he was great at all that. He proved that with the success of Siege overseas, but they needed money. So they had like the sole investor, Mustafa Akkad, who was the one who had a lot of money. He was based in London. Mustafa actually at the premiere watched the film with Irwin, and initially he was pissed because he didn't get put in the credits initially, even though he, was an executive producer because he put a lot of money into this film.
Yeah, and then they eventually put him in there, but it was very last minute, right?
Yeah, it was definitely last minute. One of the other producers, like I mentioned, was Deborah. She was very conscious about women's roles in filmmaking. She really just wanted to get more women on set. So what comes down to the success, though, of this film, what Irwin did. So Irwin got the film into 4 theaters in Kansas City in October. That was like the opening. And it did okay. Like it didn't do great. It didn't blow anybody's minds, but it didn't tank either. So shortly after that, they took it to the Chicago Film Festival. And that's when they were able to confirm it was indeed a hit because it blew up after the Chicago Film Festival. But even after it opened in the 4 theaters in Kansas City, he was really closely tracking those numbers. And he realized that part of why this film got so big was word of mouth. Because, kids would go see it. They'd call their friends like, hey, you want to go see this film with me tomorrow? I just saw it. It was great. So that's how the word spread. And that is a quick caveat into our podcast. We would so appreciate if you would tell a friend about our podcast. If you like having a good time with horror movies and RPGs, seeing if you can survive in this horror movie, we would so appreciate it. You can tell a friend that you like, you can tell an enemy, especially if you think they would like it. Why not give them that grace and that act of kindness? Any hoodles, back to our show. Nick, what did you think about the producing aspect of this film?
Fun little plug there, Kylie. Sorry, you said the producing of this film?
Yeah.
The whole role of producer in general just has always been kind of has been kind of elusive to me. It just seems like producer is person who tries to promote the film. I guess in this regard, what are we talking about more specifically?
So specifically in this film, Irwin and Mustafa were the two main producers. Deborah
Mhm.
also was a producer. She probably handled a lot of the day-to-day stuff. But like you said, so Irwin, a lot of his job was coming up with the idea of the film, pitching it to the director writer, and then marketing the film. Mustafa's job was like financing the film. Deborah's job was making sure everything else went smoothly, which is a big job. So yeah, producer title has like a lot of varied meanings.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. You were talking about financing, and one thing we discussed earlier was the fact that this movie cost about $300,000 to make.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be 325, I guess. But the big thing with that was the ROI on this movie. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it made what
Seven,
47 million dollars.
yeah,
So we're talking like, let's just put it this way, that's more than 10 times what it cost. So that alone is a huge achievement for any movie, especially nowadays
yeah,
when a lot of movies end up having $500,000, not even 500,000 $1 million budgets, you know.
yeah.
So that alone is, as far as a production standpoint, to control a film, to have that tight of a budget and have this great of a turn back on it, very impressive.
Yeah, I agree with you there. As I'm going to dance on over to production design, they really were very specific about having no blood in this film, which, in a good way, it gave the production design team a little less work to do. Tommy Lee Wallace was the main production designer. He was friends with John Carpenter. Nancy Keys, who I mentioned earlier, I believe she played Annie. She did costumes and art design. And she also was knew people in the industry. So she connected them to a makeup artist, a script supervisor, camera assistant, and more people. But Tommy Lee Wallace had a couple notable like tricks up his sleeve to get the production design done. The most notable would be the mask, obviously. So they did a camera test between a clown mask and a Captain Kirk mask. However, the Captain Kirk mask was redesigned where the sideburns were taken off. It was painted white, the eye holes were made bigger, and it just was this leery, like looming presence. Eerie and looming, yep, eerie presence. It was this eerie presence. So
Yeah, and I saw the picture of the sad clown face, and I mean that just had a bit more of a ridiculous tone to it. So I'm glad they went the Captain Kirk route. Um, I think at the beginning, one of the first scenes with 6-year-old Michael, that's what he was wearing. That was a clown mask, right?
yeah, so it would have made sense if he wore a clown mask through the rest of the film, but I like that they went this different route. The mask also was possibly inspired by a film John Carpenter had seen, Il Fosse. I probably pronounced that horribly, about a burned woman that wore an expressionless mask. Because it was written in a way that this character isn't really making any facial features. So Tommy Lee Wallace had that to work with. One like funny note was this was filmed in the spring. So they really struggled to find pumpkins for this film. It's called Halloween. You got to have pumpkins. So there are only 3 used in the whole film. And the rest of the film, they used different types of gourds and painted them to make them fit like the fall aesthetic. And like for leaves, they would like throw leaves down off of like roofs and stuff, and then they'd sweep them up and put them in a bag and do it again for the next take.
Oh,
Make it
I
fit.
would. I
So
would hate to have that job. I mean, I couldn't even picture myself just like describing people like, oh yeah, I painted gourds for this movie. I was the leaf collector.
that was yeah, I Nancy probably did some of that because she was an art designer for this film. Tommy though was Michael Myers in the iconic closet scene because he did like a lot of the design of setting up the closet, and he was like, someone's gonna get hurt between all the hangers and the closet slats if I'm not the one doing it. So he was the one that did the stabbing. Tommy Lee Wallace was also one of the editors, along with Charles Borstein, and they wanted to create an ending that would leave people feeling anxious as they headed to their cars. But they didn't have a lot of footage of just empty neighborhoods. Because, at the end, you see like empty neighborhoods, empty porches, like Michael is nowhere to be seen. But the editors, Tommy and Charles, happened to save all these empty shots from right before the film, the clapboard comes in and says, like, take one and action. So they happened to save all of those shots of just silence right before the action was called, which was really cool. They happened to save all that because most people wouldn't think to save that.
Yeah, and so you're saying so it was just the silent shots basically that they were talking about, where it's just looking over the neighborhood saying, "Oh, he can't be found at all."
Yeah, those shots at the very end, and those
Yeah.
were shots that normally would have been deleted.
Yeah. I promise I watched this movie. I definitely remember the ending. Now.
So this film, the success of it, studios didn't initially want to watch it. The college students were willing to watch it, so that's kind of why it got distributed to like Kansas City and had like decent response, and then it grew from there based on the word of mouth little pitch that I gave earlier. But people loved experiencing the movie together. They loved being able to laugh at the screen, talk at it, scream at it together, and the fact that they chose to identify the film itself with a holiday gave it this cultural success it wouldn't have had otherwise. Because if it was the babysitting murders, no
You
one's
keep saying babysitting.
I mean, babysitting murderers, it would not have had the success that it did.
Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful, Doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
Doesn't. Halloween rolls off the tongue. So, yeah, the slasher industry followed. Obviously, it's still a cult classic today. Like, there's a michaelmyers.net chat board that I happen to stumble across in my research. There are some hardcore fans out there. And, movie 13 came out last year or the year before. They're still making these. They're pumping them out because people love this experience of going to the theater together and having this chance to imagine what's happening and just be immersed in it. So yeah, I think it was just so well done, and it's just a legacy that really carries on today. Hello everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Survive This Crit. We really hope that you enjoyed it, and we would love for you guys to get more involved in our show. And we'd love to hear what movies you want us to watch. So if you don't mind leaving a comment of what film you want to watch, you're going to get to be a part of our show. You get to be a playing character in our role-playing game by commenting in the film. Nick or I will be playing you, and you get to be a part of the story. And you get to be a part of seeing if you get to survive against this killer. So make sure to please comment a film that you want us to review, and we'll see if you get to survive. But again, make sure to subscribe, tell your friends, and thank you so much for tuning in. That's all for now.
Bye, everybody.